Although Nostradamus died 458 years ago, he seemed to be quite involved with U.S. politics. President Trump appeared in multiple quatrains, and the decoding seemed to pretell his rise, his temper, and even his troubles. Even how January 6th would divide the United States was clearly noted. But what about 2024? To solve this, I first tried to see if Nostradamus said anything about Kamala Harris. Finding Harris is not easy, as both Kamala and Harris are not searchable words. So I searched the word she, and I found one interesting quatrain that may hint about how she has come to the world stage. Like I said before, I believe some important messages may be hidden in a cluster of quatrains. And this one starts in Century 2, Quatrain 13, quote, "The body without soul no longer to be sacrificed. Day of death put for birthday. Doomsday. The divine spirit will make the soul happy, seeing the world in its eternity." Before I start, I want to remind everyone that Nostradamus wrote all these in old-time French, which is already difficult to decode. Plus, he is famous for making his predictions vague. I'll explain now why I think this is about Miss Harris. First, how did Miss Harris become the last-minute Democratic nominee? Because everyone thought President Biden would fail. He would be slaughtered by Trump, and his mind seemed to be drifting away from his body. Does that fit the first line? The body without soul no longer to be sacrificed? And how did President Biden fall from a beloved leader to a presumed failure? He lost on his age. Day of death put for birthday. Do you see it now? While the third and fourth line, the divine spirit will make the soul happy, seeing the world in its eternity, seem to predict the sudden change of political landscape. The next quatrain in the cluster seems to also be about current events. We find in Century 2, Quatrain 14, quote, "At Tours, Guine guarded eyes will be searching, discovering from afar her serene highness. She and her suite will enter the port, combat thrust, sovereign power." Although there may be different meanings hidden in this quatrain, I'll focus on the few key words linking this quatrain to the 2024 election. In line 1, at Tours, guarded. Eyes will be searching. Does that sound like what happened during Trump's tour that eventually led to Harris's nomination? Especially when you read with the second line, discovering from after her serene highness. That event paved ways for her to enter the world stage, just like the third line, enter the port. And the fourth line indicating her possible victory as it stated, combat, thrust, sovereign power. Still not sure? Let's look at the third part of the cluster. We find in Century 2, Quatrain 15, quote, "Shortly before the monarch is assassinated. Castor and Pollux in the ship, bearded star. The public treasure emptied by land and sea. Pisa asti ferrara, Turin, land under interdict." Although I'm not too sure on what line 2 and 4 means, but line 1 talked about the monarch is assassinated, and line 3 stated the public treasure emptied by land and sea. Doesn't monarch assassinated describe again the unexpected assassination attempt to change history? And aren't we out of time? When our public treasure is emptied. Of course, there are other possible explanations that can give a totally different decoding. But I have to say, Nostradamus must have eyed the 2024 events when he wrote these. Now, let's look at another possible prediction from Nostradamus. We find in Century 5, Quatrain 15, quote, "The great pontiff taken captive while navigating. The great one thereafter to fail the clergy in tumult. Second one elected absent, his estate declines. His favorite bastard to death broken on the wheel. I'm not sure if this is related to the 2024 US election, but if it is, the third line, second one elected absent, means the one seeking second term would fail the election and his estate declines. How many people have an estate and can be called estate in declines? And the next quatrain seem to have details that may also be about the assassination plot. Let's take a look at Century 6, Quatrain 92, quote, Prince of beauty so comely, around his head a plot, the second deed betrayed, the city to the sword in dust, the face burnt. Through too great murder, the head of the king hated. Whether you like President Trump or not, you must agree that he handled the assassination comely and beautifully, like what is stated in line 1. And the plot is aimed at his head, as stated in line 2. He ducked and his face burnt like the third line said. No one knew why the 20-year-old gunman did it. Was it driven by hatred, like the fourth line stated? We may never know. The quatrain after this may also be about the current events, and if it is, would make these two a quatrain cluster. Let's look at Century 6, Quatrain 93, quote, the greedy prelate deceived by ambition. He will come to reckon nothing too much for him. He and his messengers completely trapped. He who cut the wood sees all in reverse. This one may be hard to decode, but what if this is about Trump's VP pick, J.D. Vance? J.D. invested in a firm with vertical farming. Could that be what line 4 says? He would cut the wood, see all in reverse. How about the line, he will come to reckon nothing too much for him? People have said the VP pick in presidential elections is really not relevant at all. So maybe this has nothing to do with anything. But haven't people said that Vance really didn't help President Trump in this election? Now the last and maybe the most important quatrain we find in Century 2 Quatrain 44, quote, the eagle driven back around the tents will be chased from there by other birds. When the noise of cymbals, trumpets, and bell will restore the senses of the senseless lady. Line 1 talked about eagle, which most consider as a symbol of the United States. And do you think 2024 is a tough year for the American eagle? As stated in line 2, chased by other birds. Now look at line 3. Did you see trumpets? You know, trumpets is what Nostradamus calls Trump. And now the last line. Will restore the senses of the senseless lady. Seem to have not so favorable view on the lady running. But the noise from trumpet. Maybe he meant attacks from Trump. Made her look like a more sensible choice. So, what do you think? We know the quatrains are vague, and my decodings are the best I can come up with. So, do your own findings and decodings, and share with us. Maybe we're totally off the mark, or maybe we are right on. This is Ken Peters. Thank you for watching.